My name's Simon Harvey. I'm here as an individual. I have to say this, I'm speaking on behalf of myself, not my employer, because I'm really, really scared of the HR forms. But also there was a very interesting thread on Twitter this week. I was last Monday, kicked off by this one. This tweet was really a go at the RSA Conference for having that whole stream of mental health talks. And there's actually some very good arguments on both sides on whether non-professionals should be talking about mental health. So I am going to play the fine line. I'm here as an individual. I'm a normal security guy. I'm saying that in quotes for the people who work with me. I do have a basic mental health first aid accreditation through Mental Health First Aid Australia. I've left the book somewhere. But still, if I accidentally veer into my own history, which I'll try not to, this advice is general, it's intended as such. What works for me may not work for you, which is why I'll try and avoid it for this exact reason that's on the right. If you are affected by this, by anything we talk about today, there'll be some contacts on the slide, or I'll be around afterwards, and I'll learn to turn the screensaver off as well. So imposter syndrome, here we go again. Click. So why is mental health an issue? Well, back in 2011, I need to find some updated stats, it was the third biggest cause of death and disability in this country. So by disability is unable to work, not the traditional physical disability that we think of. That's after cardiovascular and health and cancer. In 2011, it was roughly about 1 in 5 people would be diagnosed with a mental health issue by a medical professional, by a doctor or a psychologist, which I'll come on to on a subsequent slide. And about 1 in 10 of those, so only about 2% of the population, which is still too many, would be diagnosed with a severe mental health problem. So this is getting into the suicidal attempts, extreme psychosis, etc. But what I noticed in a previous employer who sent us all the management layer into mental health first aid training, that it wasn't just the people at that employer I worked at, which was in workplace health insurance. It was also, I looked around at my peers in the industry, thought about myself, my own history, and realised that mental health issues are extremely pronounced in the IT sector, but then there's one particular segment of that, InfoSec, where we do have a lot of mental health issues. Fortunately, there's a lot of deaths in our industry, particularly in the US. There's a lot of depression, and these sets of figures are actually more generic. They're across the whole of society in Australia in 2011, I think this was. But about the 1 in 5 I mentioned, there's a disproportionate amount affecting females over males. In general, they found that males tend to suffer the standard mental health issues, anxiety, depression, bipolar, but a high proportion had substance abuse disorders. It's water. Alcohol, drugs, whether that's illegal drugs, prescription drugs, and they tend to make the ultimate sacrifice and suicide quite young, before they're around 40. What the research found, which shocked me and the researchers, is this column. Those 1 in 5, and this was back in 2011, remember, not where we are today. The females that were researched, a lot higher proportion of anxiety, depression, bipolar, and in general, a lot higher mental health issues than the male cohort did. Any female in the room would probably be looking at me going, well, duh, but you know what the government's like. What they found was that men tend to internalise it, use drugs, use alcohol, prescription drugs, non-prescription medication in their lives. Females tend not to, and they're not entirely sure why. The theory being, is it trying to be the matriarch of the family, trying to be the strong one because the husband or the father or the boyfriend has taken that sacrifice. The reason I'm mentioning is that they carry this on, in general, to their dying day. So from around 40 to 90, 93, that's 50 years of suffering with poor mental health in general and stuff all support in Australia for women over 40. Because the media, governments, politicians, they're focusing on the suicide rates and the younger generations and the males, because that makes headlines, sports people, university students, politicians, but not here. So it's just something I want to leave you all with that thought in mind, that mental health is definitely not a male issue. It's definitely not an only female issue. But those that are suffering mostly in silence. And believe me, I was one of the males suffering. I know many females that are and really have no one to turn to, which is part of this, why I do this talk. But why is it an issue in the cybers? Is it because of who we are? Of our personality types? A lot of us are perfectionists. Luckily, the talk this morning from John Peter, I think it was, imposter syndrome. So a lot of people in this room were nodding this morning in that talk. I think I'm suffering it right now, to be honest. In my day job, I'm an architect, and architects, we apparently we know everything, but there's a lot of this in here. But it's also the nature of the work we do, risk management. We always see the bad stuff, but very rarely see the good stuff. For those of us who are in consulting, see lots of bad stuff everywhere. In operations, my God, I don't know how you deal with it. I just hear about it from you guys. Also, in associated industries, for those in the room who are not cybersecurity people, but are in aligned industries, in legal, consulting, sales, recruitment, they're suffering too. And because we're so focused on trying to get our day job done, we're actually not treating these people who we work with the same respect we should be our own colleagues. Is it about the professional pressures? And everyone in the bar, put the beer down for a second. Is it the cyber dance? Are we seeing cyber all the time? I like to cyber. Organisational cultures. You know, you get shot. You get shot. If you raise a risk, if you find something bad in your organisation, are you the one that's going to have to deal with it? Who see it through to resolution? So a number of organisations in Brisbane that actually act that way. So a lot of people keep this to themselves. Customers going, why can't you just let me put that web server directly on the internet with no firewalls and no monitoring? Because those guys are. And from our perspective, why don't they listen? We can see all this bad stuff happening in our day jobs. We can see the train coming down the tracks that's going to derail. We can see the high risk, medium likelihood, high likelihood of something bad happening, customer data being breached, internal emails going, but the business don't care. So we tend to take this on as a burden ourselves. Are we actually doing this to ourselves as well? For those who work in the supply chain, a lot of customers, including where I work, we're becoming a much more difficult client. We're actually putting the stress on our supply chain, on the people who work there and their supply chain. So those of you who work with me in current and previous roles, I do that through really bad dad jokes. That's to hide all of the other stuff. But really, we actually do forget that when we outsource, when we have managed services, when we get consultants in, we're putting them under a lot more pressure than what we would have been under doing it in-house. We forget we're all people too, and a lot are suffering in this space. So, what do I mean by a mental health issue? Well, there's various definitions. I'll put some references at the bottom. The way I'm going to define them in this talk are: a mental health problem is a decline of good mental health. It's just not having normal day-to-day life. Things are getting on top of you. There's family issues, there's work issues, but it's what we all go through. And if someone says they don't have this at any point in their life, they're lying to you. But most importantly, a mental illness or a mental health condition is the diagnosable medical condition by a medical professional that causes a disability. That's the World Health Organization's definition there. Disrupts the person's ability to work, carry out daily activities, and engage in satisfying personal relationships. So there's nothing in there about physical disability or mental disability. That is the definition from the World Health Organization. This affects a person's thinking, emotional state, long-term behavior. And it's that behavior one I want everyone to think about. Because those on the left are examples of poor mental health, which most likely some people in the room suffering now have suffered. Those on the right are diagnosable medical conditions, the stuff that makes the headlines, the stuff that actually is difficult to talk about. But I don't know if it comes up on the slide very well. Can anyone tell me what the difference is between the ones on the left and the ones on the right? Oh, it's not coming up, but it's there. The ones on the left you need help for as well. Yeah. Yeah. I've grouped them on purpose because the only real difference between these two, depression, the fleeting suicidal thought, the starting to plan if you're going to go down that route, and the one on the right, there's actually three differences. The duration, how often you feel that, whether it's becoming all-consuming, you're thinking it 24/7, as opposed to a shorter period of time. Frequency, every day, all the time. And severity. This is where we're starting to take action on those thoughts. This is where, when we as people trying to look out for each other in the office, when someone's behaviour changes, they're not coming up to lunch with you every day like they used to, they're spending a bit more time on their phone, they're a little bit distracted, a bit zoned out. These are some symptoms of these things on the left starting to take hold. And what I want us to do as a community is get better at looking out for these and trying to encourage people to get help before it turns into the ones on the right. I said I wouldn't use an example. I'm going to use one. When I was suffering poor mental health 15 years ago, I had a manager at a consulting firm that really wanted to help, didn't know how. He got his manager to come up to me and ask me, is everything okay? Have you found God? Which his meanings were well-intentioned. Fortunately, I'm half Muslim, half Catholic. Both my parents' families have been, death threats and all that all through our life. Probably not this thing to give a religious thing to someone who's going towards this side. And so even though the intentions were there, how we approach, how we actually offer assistance, which I won't go into today because that's getting into the treatment side, is actually important. I'll give some tips on that. But luckily, a few crikeys ago, Eric, who will be on a bit later today, he came up with the paradox, paper foul foo. Has everyone seen this one before? So his theory is that 80% of security technologies are there to try and fix that part. Fixing technology problems, sell me a nice shiny box, put a firewall in the front, we'll be secure. Jobs are good. And 80% of security problems are down here. People are, he called it lazy, but what he actually meant was demoralized, unfocused, got their mind on other things. So when the security guys are continually beating up the users for not using strong passwords or clicking on phishing links, is it because they're malicious? Most likely not. Is it these? Demoralized, too busy, trying to get their job done. And what we're doing as security people, putting in strong passwords, not putting out single sign-on and multi-factor, we're making their lives harder, so they're trying to actively bypass that. Like, who's got those exemptions for USB keys? Because it's too hard to get data transferred on your network. There you go. The other ones, people make mistakes. People do make mistakes. Technology is there to help. But if you, as a person, have got other things going on in your life, these things, we as security professionals need to be aware that not everyone's 100% thought active every day. They may be going through other problems at home or at work. Organisational culture as well. A lot of us are in organisations where you've got to deliver More, bigger, faster, quicker, cheaper. Yesterday, security's in the way. What workplace support is there? And there's no one here from HR? Any HR function? No, I see one person laughing. A lot of human resources functions that I've worked with, they actually want to talk about this. They want to equip us in actually being able to support each other in offices. They're resource constrained as well. The lawyers won't let them do this. Budgets are cut. So there's a wider organisational issue as well, but it's not something we can solve, it's something we can advocate for, maybe using our industry as an example. But as I was updating the slides this morning, I don't know, I haven't checked the news in the past 10 minutes. Is it on? Does anyone know? We got, no election yet. So last time I gave this talk in Melbourne was on World Mental Health Day. No one in the room actually knew it was World Mental Health Day. That day, the Australian government announced a productivity commission review into mental health in Australia. That's supported by both sides of politics, and it's going to look at the commercial world. What are employers not doing or doing what they should be doing? So I'm quite hopeful that the employer community will, over time, be forced to step up. But also governments as well. And as we saw in the election, the budget a couple of days ago, 737 million was put aside for mental health and suicide prevention programs. A lot of that is going to a charity called Headspace. I don't know if anyone's familiar with them. Headspace are a fantastic organisation who give mental health support to 16 to 25-year-olds only. They do online counselling, they help teenagers in particular and the younger generation get support that they feel they can't get through anywhere else. They're going to be expanding, I believe, those services to the adult community as well. So you can get support from trained counsellors, not just some guy on Slack or on the internet or via a Google search, which...
They've dropped the minimum age back down to 12.
Have they? That's excellent news. Yeah, because it was 12 and then there was things. So saying about random guys on Slack, the InfoSec community has actually been doing quite a lot in this space, and here in Australia we're only just starting to see that. So is anyone aware of infosanity.org? So infosanity.org is a group of our peers in the US. I believe Jack Daniels, one of them, a lawyer. A lot of the personalities, they've gone quite open and actually explained their mental health problems, their journey, which is where some of this blowback is, well, what worked for me might not work for you. But on there, they've got there's people who are not health professionals, just security people like you and me that are there to listen. There's a Slack channel, invite only to keep the trolls out. But yep, there are people that work with it, work in our industry that know what we're going through, at least as a sounding board. Mental Health First Aid Australia, they're one of my favourite ones, I must admit. A lady called Betty Kitchener, who's an organisational psychologist and a nurse, back in 2010 realised we've got this crisis in Australia, set up this foundation to train employers on how you can train your people to look after each other better. It's a 2-day course, it costs quite a bit of money, but they've very nicely released a booklet on the Kindle for $5, which gives you a little bit of guidance and support of, if I suspect someone in my workplace or my family is suffering an issue, how do I approach them? How do I offer advice? What do I say? So it gives you a bit of ammunition to help you in that. And yeah, I've told my boss I want to become a trainer in this space because I'd rather do that than my next ABSA course. I think personally I'd rather go down there as well. OMSI Help, Open Source Mental Health Initiative, that's an IT-wide one. They've got some nice publications on LeanPub, which is donationware. It's actually quite good for the CIOs, the CTOs, the HR functions of, well, how do I deal with mental health issues in the technology part of my business? What should I be thinking of? That's an open source initiative on GitBooks, I think, but it's actually bottom up again. It's IT guys trying to educate businesses that you need to do something about this. Ones on the right, though, I'm especially proud of. A few of you probably know, a couple of years ago I whinged a lot to Asia or certain Crikey after too many beers, saying, I want to talk about this, and instead of pushing me away, they went, yes, yes, we'll give you all the support you need and help you. And And even worse, even better, what can you do to help us? So I'm trying to get a community of us together to actually improve how we deal with mental health in our sector, because I'm just one person. There are many others who are doing things in Australia. Betty Kitchener and Mr. Yorm, who set up Mental Health Thursday Australia, their son works at Commonwealth Bank. He's a lead threat hunter. He used to run Trustwave, David Yorm, for those who know him. He's a trainer in this space. He's been trying to get this message out for years as well. So someone I look up to for the work he's done. But also what we do, just as a function as a community, these four, is actually making a lot of difference. So I mentor a few students. I've been told by a number of students in the past couple of years that what they've found best from the mentoring programs that QUT, UQ and Griffith run is the people that are working with them are actually helping them with panic attacks, mental health issues, the fear of trying to get work in our sector, in IT. That one-on-one collaboration is actually helping, even though we might not be experts, but that sense of community is really helping each other say it's okay to not be okay. I didn't want to say that phrase, but there we go. It is okay to be not okay, and it's okay to ask for help. AWSN is an amazing organisation. Again, not set up for mental health. It's set up to actually provide a peer forum for women in security. We've heard some of the challenges, quite disgusting challenges that women do face. But that peer network, that peer support network is helping a lot of people get through. And for the men, MenShed. I've not been to one. My dad has, and he keeps going on at me about it. But that's because I want to steal my ham radio gear back off them and get my HF gear running again. With You With Me, for those who know, does anyone know who With You With Me is? Again, go on, one little wave up there. With You With Me help train people from one career stage to another. They do a lot from ex-defence personnel. They don't do mental health specifically, but providing that community, that peer engagement, they're actually helping people get through the transition. That's something that we are absolutely terrible in IT, within our own community, to go from ops to security or security to management. So there's a lot we can learn from these guys as well as supporting each other. The big four at the bottom, the big four support providers, in the past few years, they've actually realised that IT, hospitality, and 18 to 30-year-olds are the three biggest sufferers of poor mental health in Australia. Well, that's more likely 12 to 30-year-olds now. So we're starting to see some programs, particularly out of Beyond Blue, that are actually trying to target what we're doing. Hopefully we'll get some of those to a conference like this in the future to actually see what the experts in the mental health space can do to help us, and vice versa as well, for us to all support each other through this. So a few platitudes there, I'm afraid. But what can we do for ourselves? Well, and I'm not talking about work, I'm talking about life. So in your peers, managers, friends, client service providers, most importantly, your loved ones, friends, family, children. When I was doing research for the previous slide this morning, there's a heartbreaking story on the ABC website about a father who is pleading for us all in Queensland in particular to actually keep an eye out for our children. His 12-year-old attempted to end his life a few months ago. He was brain dead for 8 minutes. They brought him back, and quite luckily, no brain damage. He's making a full recovery, and this poor father is blaming himself because he didn't see the signs. So 12-year-old and younger are actually suffering with this, making attempts. So the first thing I would look for, and what he's trying to campaign for, say it's on the ABC News website today, look for changes in day-to-day behaviour. Someone not engaging as they normally do in the office, not coming to lunch with you, not coming for a coffee when they used to do that. Children withdrawing into themselves, spending more time in their room, on the phone, on the computer. That is the time to get advice. That's when your headspaces, lifelines, your GP is your best friend here. What can I do? I suspect something's going on, but I don't know how to approach. If you don't feel confident, that's the first person to call. If your GP doesn't care or is not interested or too busy, find another GP. because really this stuff's too important. What should we do more as an industry? Should we be training ourselves better? Should we as IT people start to dispel the myth that we can't talk about this and actually support each other? I've taken my awkward hugs band off, but if anyone wants to hug, more than happy. But it's really we're all people, regardless of what we do in our day jobs, we need to look out for each other, because for those of us that have gone through this, we don't want you to go through what we've been through. The actor, Mrs. Doubtfire, who's the actor last year, Robert Williams, his quote was, the reason why people advocate for the stuff, we've been through the pain, we don't want a single person to go through this ever again. It's a goal, we'll get there eventually. The big two are like for, actually, how do you do that first approach? Are you okay? areyouok.org.au. To actually take someone aside, ask how you're feeling, be prepared for when they say no, but when they do say no, listen. Don't talk, just let them speak, don't push them to speak more than they want to. What works for me may not work for them, so don't give advice on treatment. Have you found God? Have you tried mindfulness? Mindfulness doesn't work for me, I know, but I do know it works extremely well for other people. Encourage action. So the person who's suffering needs to be in control. That's extremely important. Encourage them to seek help, to speak to their GP. That's probably the key one. Speak to your GP or call one of these numbers, which I'm going to give you on the next slide. And check in. How are you going for a coffee? Don't force the issue. Some people it's quite slow, some people it's quite quickly. In my case, it was 10 years. And I wouldn't be standing here now if someone didn't do this to me. The mental health first aider approach is pretty much exactly the same, but encouraging support, peer support as well. Let's say, contact me offline if you need some more links, but we'll make these slides and this talk available. And it'll be on the website, this talk, won't it? Yep. So, I know we're over time a little bit, so I've got 5 minutes, I guess, for questions, but one plea, if you could all, or most of you, take those phone numbers, put them in your phone. The QR codes are not Crick rolls, I promise. I did check them before I came up today. No one's done a man in the middle on me. If not only for you or your family, for your friends, for your work colleagues. Because at least, because you'll see someone who's suffering when you least expect it, being able to whip out phone and say, for an 12 to 25-year-old, or now a bit older, Headspace is fantastic. They've got trained counsellors there from 6 p.m. till 2 a.m., I think it is, online and by phone. Beyond Blue and Lifeline 24/7. And this last one at the bottom, I didn't get permission to add it. There's someone in our community, I don't know who it is, but the people that told me about this, I've got no reason to not trust them, is suffering. They are on the right-hand side of that diagram. They are trying to get professional help. They can't afford professional help. So instead of that extra beer tonight, if you can chuck $5, $10 to that GoFundMe, I know a few people in the room already have. I think they're trying to raise about $25,000 for the help they need. I think that's the best gift we can give today. So, any questions?
Round of applause for Simon.